Hi, this is Rochelle, and you're listening to Box F1 Pod. So today I'm talking all about Season 5 of Drive to Survive, and it's such a great throwback to the 2022 F1 season that I'm obviously gonna go through every single episode and talk about some of my favorite quotes, moments, and storylines, but also sort of talk about how it compares to what actually happened. And I'm gonna finish it off by talking about all the stuff that they missed, which, if you kept up last year, you will know that they missed a lot. So without further ado, let's get into it. Quickly before I get into the first episode, Drive to Survive gets so much flack for inaccuracies and playing around with radio messages and footages from different circuits to fit their storyline. But this is TV. They have a story to tell, and they're so successful at drawing in like new fans that keep the sport growing. And they also give diehard fans some behind the scenes moments that they wouldn't get otherwise. Like Toto Wolff said it best to a producer when the guy was like, "We're trying to make this a documentary." And Toto literally just laughs at him and goes, "This is not a documentary. This is more close to Top Gun than a documentary." Um, but also, I guess Drive to Survive is listening to someone because there was a very obvious like shift in tone this season. They're definitely moving away from driver drama, whether real or fake. Although, okay, they get a lot of crap for like faking a lot of driver drama. Like the one people reference a lot is Lando and Daniel, but that wasn't really like fake. They didn't like each other at the beginning. They like only became friends like halfway through the first season after Daniel's win. There seemed to be like a shift and they became much closer. But at the beginning, they weren't like the biggest fans of each other, or at least it seemed that way, even outside of Drive to Survive. So that wasn't really fake, in my opinion. But they do exaggerate a lot. Um, and I don't know if this change is exclusively because of Mac's participation or if like all the drivers rioted together. But the series definitely seems to have shifted and taken all that drama and put it squarely on the team principal's shoulders, which is still excellent content. But I do wish we could still add a dash of driver drama because there was definitely enough real drama to go around. It's not like they had to make stuff up. Regardless, there were still some standout moments and quotes that I'm completely obsessed with. So, with that, let's get into episode 1. And really, the best part of this episode was Gunther and Mattia Binotto's adventure. And like I know everyone already talked about this, but like their like little like trip through the Italian countryside in the tiny little Fiat or whatever car they were in is so hilarious and incredible. Also, I always forget that Gunther is Italian, but he is. He just doesn't have like the same Italian energy that like Mattia just exudes. Like you don't even have to hear Mattia speak. You look at him and you're like, that man is Italian. And then he speaks and you're like, that man is Italian. um they're also like just such an unexpected pairing. I guess Gunther is kind of an unexpected pairing with anyone. He's just so out of left field compared to the other team principals. But I'm obsessed with them, and it's just so heartbreaking that Mattia's gone now, and we will get no more content with them. I also love that Mattia acknowledged that Gunther is the main character. He said in his interview, he was like, he's a striking fellow. I keep telling him, you're the protagonist of that Netflix show. The fact that he called it that Netflix show as he's talking to Netflix makes me laugh because it reminds me of like season 1, I think, when they asked, or season 2, they asked Mattia if he watched Drive to Survive, and he's like, I don't have Netflix. Which seems very on brand for him. Okay, the other big thing in this episode was George Russell with Mercedes. And I kind of loved George in this episode. He gets such a bad rap online, which is hilarious. Don't get me wrong. He has launched like so many viral memes completely unintentionally, or that weird rumor that he's a robot. But I feel like the Drive to Survive was good for him. Like it kind of made him kind of made me warm up to him so much. My heart did break for him though when he came out to meet the fans and they were like, "Oh, we're waiting for Lewis," and he's like, "That's okay." He also dropped some classic George Russell lines. That's groovy. I don't even remember what it was to, but he said that's groovy, and there's very few things in life that George Russell would ever be naturally able to say that's groovy too. Also, when he's describing the porpoising, he said it reminds him of Pimp My Ride, but in a bad way. Which hearing George say Pimp My Ride is funny just on its own, but I just can't even imagine him watching that show. It's just so funny. Um Also, I loved how it showed all the other drivers reacting to the Mercedes. Like they automatically looked at it and were like, what is wrong with it? Seb straight up just went up to George and goes, it looks shit. And they were all just standing around the car and just like asking George like why it looks like that and like talking shit about it. And George is like, guys, I didn't design it. I don't know what's going on. The other big thing in this episode was Haas. Will Buxton accurately says it seems that whenever something bad happens, it lands on Gunther's desk. And I completely forgot the war in Ukraine broke out like 3 weeks before the season started. So Gunther had to immediately replace his oligarch sponsorship money. And Nikita Mazepin, who to be honest could have been fired for poor performance as well as for having shitty family friends, had to be let go, basically. And my favorite quote from this is Gunther saying, fucking hell, I don't need any of this. Fucking hell, no more Russians. I'm done with Russians until I go from this planet. And that's obviously how we got Kevin Magnussen back in the seat. And Kevin Magnussen really needed that year off. He's matured so much. He's a dad now. And he just seems like a different person. And everyone talks about it. Like Gunther mentioned it, Kevin mentioned it. He's like, I'm no longer like Wreck-It Ralph. Like having a dad has changed my attitude and mentality completely. And we do see that. He's much more composed. It's nice. I also did love him saying it's weird to be lucky with you guys. And him and Gunther just laugh because when he left, the car was in a tragic state. And now he finished like seventh or whatever. Also, just to end this episode on a positive note, I was thrilled to relive Charles's battle with Max in that very first episode and watching him win. I forgot how completely insane those first couple of races were, but it's also really tragic to see the kind of high they were on and to know how it ended for them. It's also like we also get to see a bit of the pressure Mattia is under to deliver. Ferrari in general has such a reputation that the second they show any promise, everyone like pounces on them, and that pressure is clearly a very heavy toll on Mattia and like the whole team. Okay, episode 2. There are a few moments I wanted to highlight quickly before we talk about the scene to end all scenes, the greatest thing to ever grace my television screen. We will get to it. But first, that one moment at the beginning of the episode when a girl brings her dog to Toto Wolff and says, I named my dog Toto Wolff. And he goes, well, of course you did. This is a beautiful and intelligent dog. Um, Also, every time we saw Tom Cruise just like behind Toto during that one race was just like such a jump scare. Just like, why is he there? Also, this episode was the first one to show Guan Yu's crash. They replayed it through several episodes, which was a lot, but this was the first episode to kind of focus on it because we were focusing on Mercedes. And I'm kind of annoyed that Guan Yu's only screen time is to come on screen and say, hi, I'm Joe Guan Yu. Thank you, George, for helping me. I'm fine after that crash. And then we never saw him again. He could have been great content. He is fabulous. He drinks boba. He's fashionable. Why wouldn't you follow him around? Why? Anyway, so the only positives here is that when they were replaying his crash, they also showed George coming out of his car to help him, and they did that run. I got to relive that run of George running across like the side of the track to go see if he was okay, which is a very noble and incredible thing to do, and it's very lovely. But George running looks like a leaping gazelle, and like that image of his like endless legs just like galloping across lives like rent free in my mind. I also love that little tidbit that Lewis Hamilton gifted the entire Mercedes team Union Jack Speedos for Silverstone, which makes me like him so much more. Like, where is this fun Lewis on a day-to-day basis? Why don't we get to see that side of him? That's a great gag gift to give people. Um, I am going to complain for 1 second though about Will Buxton encouraging the rumors of Lewis's retirement, even when that was what people were speculating at the time. Like, it just felt so out of the realm of possibility for me, not because it doesn't make sense given what happened. Like, he's had a storied career. 2021 was a very difficult season, and that final race was so emotionally and physically taxing. A break was well deserved. But does Lewis Hamilton at all seem like the kind of guy that would quit after something like that? And like when that was followed with him getting a shitty car and things not going his way, why would he give up? He's not going to quit because his car sucks. Like, not only would that look bad, I just don't think he doesn't strike me as the kind of person that would be able to live with that. It feels like a huge like disservice to his character that those rumors were even being thrown around. I feel like all of this has only made him more determined to get the eighth win and to rise back up. It's literally tattooed on him. Still I rise. What, a bad car 1 year is gonna make him be like, nah, I'm over it. Lewis deserves more, and I think he's shown us over and over again that he's not the kind of guy who quits when things get tough, basically. Even if it was warranted. Anyway, okay. And Mercedes struggling is basically the premise of this episode, and it also sets the scene for the scene to end all scenes, the greatest thing I've ever seen that will go down in history books, the team principal meeting. I watched this at least 3 times on Netflix. I watch it through every time it comes up on TikTok. I just cannot get enough of it. It is art. It's got like Office meets Real Housewife like vibes. It's everything you could want and more. The camera work, catching all the reactions, the way they cut to interviews at the perfect moments. Get this episode a Golden Globe, an Emmy, whatever other TV show award it can get. It's just perfection. And I honestly can't figure out how to talk about it without just like going through it word by word. So let's just start at the beginning. First of all, this meeting was sort of supposed to be like a catch-up session, and Stefan Diminciali, who's F1 president, who was leading the meeting, is basically trying to call the meeting to order and get everyone's attention. And meanwhile, Gunther is just chattering away in German, and Stefan is like, "Gunther, excuse me," and Gunther was like, "Oh, sorry, teacher, I'm listening." It was cute, but anyways, even though this is like a catch-up session, as Stefan puts it, Toto sort of turns this meeting to be about porpoising. Um, Basically, at the beginning of the season, all the cars were struggling with it, but Mercedes was the worst. And everyone by this point managed to fix the issue, but Mercedes was unable to like find a way to make it work. And so Toto was taking out his frustration out on the other principals. Which honestly made zero sense because he basically couldn't figure out how to change the car, so he was demanding the rules be changed instead. And to be fair, Toto is usually, other than like moments of anger that we've seen him like beating the desk and like ripping headphones apart, other than those moments, he's generally a very well composed, logical, rational human being. So to see him sort of unravel like this is slightly alarming, but also makes sense given what he was going through. Like when he came into F1 like 8 years ago, he came in on a high. He came in and won, came in with the car was already great, so he was set up to win, and he just kept winning for 8 years. He hasn't had to deal with like the panic and the stress of like not being able to fix the car, not being able to give the drivers what they need, the panic of loss. Like he has not dealt with that, whereas the other team principals who have lived like in frustration at Mercedes dominance have dealt with those feelings before. And so it makes sense that Toto is reacting in an irrational way because these are just feelings that he's not used to feeling. So here's Toto just like yelling at everyone that they're playing a dangerous game and he's gonna come after all of them. And Mattia tries to interrupt him by shaking his head and just going, Toto. And Toto goes, "Wait a second, I am talking." Which to be honest sounds slightly more alarming in a German accent than literally any other accent. But Christian, who as always is the hardest working housewife, goes, "Oh, wait a minute, are we playing to the camera here?" Which in my world is equivalent to Denise Richards from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills going bravo, bravo, fucking bravo to try and cut the scene. And Toto literally is like, "I don't care." And then the camera cuts to Andrea Seidel just smirking at the entire situation. Um, and Mattia manages to get a word in and points out that like safety in this particular situation is a team responsibility. And Toto goes, each of you has done something to limit the problem. Congratulations. Which like is so counterproductive to the point he's trying to make. I don't know why he said it, but he did. And then Christian comes in with the quote of the century. You have a problem, change your fucking car. Which is literally the problem. Like, yeah, the FIA could adjust the rules, but all the other teams managed to find a solution. Toto counters Christian's point by saying Checo has also been complaining about the car and that he has the transcripts on him. And I am telling you, the only thing missing from this scene is Toto pulling out a bedazzled binder with like every instance a driver has complained about a car ever printed out and highlighted like at a reunion. And Toto's basically like, you have a problem too. And Christian's like, no, I don't. And he's like, your driver said so. And he's like, no, he didn't. Shall we go get him? That was, sorry, everyone, about the accent. Basically the meeting goes nowhere because there's nowhere it can go. Stefan Domenicali basically is like, we'll arrange to have this conversation with the FIA so we're in like the proper condition and situation to make changes. Basically trying to smooth things over. And the meeting ends with, I kid you not, Gunther standing up and going, well, let's go porpoising. It's just so good. As Toto is like mindlessly yelling at everyone, Christian is sassing it up. All the other like team principals are just like lolling. Mattia is shaking his head in like disappointment, and Gunther's like, let's go porpoising. But the best part, not the best part, all of this has been the best part, but another best part is the follow-up with all the team principals reacting to the meetings in their interviews. Gunther was like, I don't know if there was some level of showmanship or not, but obviously we were accused of wanting to hurt people, which we don't want, by the way. We're not all killers here. Jos Capito said, the Williams team principal says, oh yeah, it was great sitting back watching the drama. I think for me it was very entertaining. Toto's extremely competitive and he can't stand losing, so for sure he isn't happy. I'm gonna miss Jos, he's not here anymore. And then Mattia says, I saw Toto reacting in a very emotional way. Maybe he was under pressure for their performance at the time. Maybe he promised something to someone. But I believe as team principals, we always have to stay rational. Surprising. I didn't expect it from him. Which is facts, like I said. No one expects calm, rational PR Toto to be totally irrational, especially on camera, unless it was tactical. So don't really blame Christian for pointing that one out. But we do know he has anger issues. Usually it's outbursts like in the middle of a race that are not as out of left field as this, yelling at all the other team principals about his own problems, but hey ho. And then Christian says he got himself wound up. It's a horrible feeling that suddenly you're just part of the scenery. You're not competing, and that takes an adjustment, and that causes self-doubt, and it can create a whole bunch of emotions that haven't been there. And like, look, people can hate Christian, but he has been here before. He won 4 years in a row with Seb and then went on a giant losing spree. He knows what this emotional journey is like, and Toto doesn't. Mercedes is losing. Mercedes hasn't lost in years. Actually, like I said, Toto hasn't sucked since he came into F1, which was great for him and shit for everyone else. Obviously, resentment builds up in everyone, so I don't know why Christian is getting a hard time for literally stating the obvious when he said, finally, you start to see problems. Everyone is enjoying this, because everyone is enjoying this, as they should. Toto certainly enjoyed it for years. Why can't they, like, gloat a little that you suck, I don't? Not like they're actually wishing bad on Toto, but, like, it probably does feel nice to see someone who has, like, crushed your soul for 8 years struggle a little. And like obviously I'm not saying I expected Toto to be better. It's really hard to pick yourself up after doing so well for so long and then now doing terribly and some of it feels out of your control. And like we see Toto struggling, and it's nice to see him struggling. It's nice to know that he is a human and not a god amongst men. Anyways, thank you, Netflix, for this scene. I am forever grateful. But also, I want everyone to imagine what we would get if Bravo was producing Drive to Survive. Can you imagine what we would get? It would be art. It would be incredible. Okay, so anyway, episode 3 focuses on Ferrari and it opens up with one of my favorite moments. Charles and Carlos are on set at a Shell gas station, which still makes me laugh, by the way. Like, the concept is so amusing to me. But watching them both struggle to actually execute this commercial was even funnier than the commercial itself. Anyway, Charles is getting his makeup done, and we catch this conversation between him and his makeup artist. She goes, "How are you?" And Charles says, "Good." And she goes, "Good." Charles goes, "I'm perfect." And she goes, "You are perfect." Truer words have never been spoken. The like little pause and then, "You are perfect." Yes. Also, another moment that's been going viral is Charles saying in his Drive to Survive interview that he's only been pulled over by police once and they just asked for his picture and let him go. And I've seen this clip so many times. And not until last night did I realize that they asked for a selfie. I thought they asked for an ID this entire time. And I'm like, why are people finding this so funny that they asked for his ID? And now I get it. They asked for a selfie, which is funnier. That is a good story. Okay. Anyways, let's quickly get all the Miami moments out of the way before we focus on the tragic downfall of Ferrari. First, the F1 president, Stefano, singing the American national anthem just took me out. It was so funny. Also, him walking by the fake marina and asking the people on the yachts if the waves were too strong or if they were feeling okay. Dad jokes exist in every culture. They're universal. I kind of love Stefano after this season. I feel like he's good banter. I feel like we should get more of him. Also, when Caitlyn Jenner was talking to Christian Horner and she's just towering over poor little Christian, waxing poetic about Ferrari and how they're doing incredible and that Ferrari is Formula One. And Christian is just like blinking and nodding at her, like, okay. Classic Caitlyn Jenner. But the best moment definitely is Paris Hilton watching Ferrari practice a pit stop and then going, "That's hot. That's like literally hot." So good. Another great scene, and this was post Miami, but we got to see Carlos, Kako, Lando, and Charles play a game of tennis. And then Carlos Sainz Sr. stops by, and it's just all three Carloses and Lil Lando and Charles. And it was just cute. It was a good moment. I also loved, there's, besides all of those cute little moments, the concept of this episode I hated because it's so heartbreaking to relive the Ferrari tragedy of last year. But I do love that this episode highlighted Carlos's win. I loved his preamble to Silverstone saying, "A Formula One driver is always selfish. I am selfish. I am going to go full Latino mode." Um, and he did, but it was heartbreaking for Charles, and we got to rewatch Carlos's win and I guess Charles's loss from all angles. The way they like cut in, like as they're like showing Carlos's win in Silverstone and like the lead up to it, and the way they cut Charles's interview into the scene saying you can never argue with Mattia on strategy. And then it cuts to Carlos completely ignoring team orders to not race Charles and fighting for his win. It's just so sad because it just shows how incredible Charles could probably be because he for sure has the skills and the talent and the fortitude to be a world champion. But the fact that he doesn't fight Ferrari on their bullshit strategies at all might be his downfall. But as much as I loved Carlos's win, and I don't want anything to be taken away from that, I'm going to focus a little bit on Charles now because his story is the tragic one, particularly in this race. So, like, we literally see Christian spelling out exactly what Ferrari's strategy should have been for Charles and being extremely confused why it's not all about Charles there. And I love that he loves Charles. And also, I love all the footage of him and Max, like, predicting Charles' strategy and then both being confused why Ferrari didn't do that. This is where it gets weird and why everyone was so confused. Like, we see how Ferrari brings Carlos in for a pit stop, but they don't bring Charles in. which implies that like they're going to prioritize Carlos since they put him on fresher tires. But when Carlos gets back out on track, they tell him not to fight Charles, even though Carlos is on fresher tires. Like, he probably would have had to try harder to not overtake Charles than to overtake him on fresh tires when Charles's are really old. The one interesting thing, like, it was really easy to be angry at the moment, but the one interesting thing that we get from Drive to Survive is to see things from Mattia's point of view. Like, you could see on his face, he knew he fucked over Charles by not bringing him in for a pit stop. And you could tell he felt so uncomfortable telling Carlos not to fight Charles, knowing that Carlos was ignoring him and putting Charles's race at risk. But unable to tell Carlos not to do it, you know? Um, like just unable to stop the unfolding of these events when really the biggest mistake was not bringing Charles in for a pit stop and allowing them both to fight for the race win. Um, like even when Carlos won, his driver won, Charles was P2, like there was still reason to celebrate. He was sitting there looking miserable up until Kako came over and he finally like cracked a smile and it looked like he had to physically force it. Like I know he was like I know he's happy for Carlos, but like you could tell it took him a minute to like adjust to the fact that Charles got fucked over and like it was his responsibility. Um we also got to see the infamous finger wag moment when Mattia was like talking to Charles at Silverstone after the race and was like wagging his finger at him. I'm so upset they didn't catch any audio on that or didn't ask them about it, didn't include it. Like, I really wanted the context for the finger wag. I personally think that it was to tell Charles, like, I know things are suck, but you have to put on a happy face for Carlos because it's still a big moment for him. Um, and I think Charles was happy for Carlos. It just ended up being at his own expense. So it's hard to like put on a happy face immediately. So I'm really sad we didn't get that much needed context for the finger wag. Anyway, I'm really glad that Carlos got his moment to shine. I'm glad that Netflix highlighted his win because it was such a great moment and I was so happy for him. But it is sad that at the same time Charles was losing everything he had gained in the beginning of that season, and it was also sad to see Mattia's perspective because he clearly feels so guilty about being unable to give Charles what he needs. He still wouldn't admit it though. He wouldn't admit that they made the wrong call. He stood by his call. He's a proud man, fine, but like at least it was eating him up, you know? Like you could tell that it hurt him. He was happy for Carlos, but it was still hurting him to hurt Charles. Okay, episode 4. First of all, the title of episode 4 is way harsh. It focuses on Mick's struggles at Haas, so they called it Like Father, Like Son, question mark. And considering the episode storyline concludes with Mick getting fired from Haas, that question mark is just rude AF. Because it implies he's not like father. It's just rude. And the episode is just as, if not more, brutal than the title. Like, okay, yes, Mick crashed a lot, which can be hard on a team like Haas who doesn't have a lot of money to just repair the cars all the time. But there's a lot of context that wasn't shown in the episode, like really long pit stops, like other things in the race that would prevent Mick from finishing, and even like the way they made it sound like he finished last when he finished like P15 or whatever for a Haas is fine. Like it was all the way they showed the racing clips was basically supposed to support why Haas gave up on him. But like there's actually no reason for Haas to give up on him as quickly as they did. Like I don't think Nico Hulkenberg is gonna be better. Let's put it that way. But like the entire episode was basically just Gunther going, I need to call Gene. Fuck, I need to call Gene. I need to call Gene. Fuck, what am I gonna tell him? Fuck this. Um and those phone calls were just so weird. Like the weirdest one was when Gene says you can't develop talent and Gunther's like, yeah. Like, yes, you can develop talent. Everyone with talent needs it to be developed. You can't create talent, but all talent needs to be developed and nurtured. And Mick was not given the environment or the support or the grace or the tools to develop that talent. He just wasn't. And he has talent. We all know he has talent. So to say that is just so cruel. Um and it's extra cruel. Well, I don't know if it's extra cruel, but Mick does have it harder than a lot of the other drivers because both Max Verstappen and Gunther talk about how the Schumacher name is a curse and a blessing for Mick. Um, because he does, like, even though there are other drivers on the track who have fathers who drove, none of them are Michael Schumacher. None of them are the greatest driver to ever live. And Mick has to live with the pressure of having the most successful Formula One driver as a father, and he also has to deal with the stress of him not being able to be there and support him. And I feel like that's such a challenging thing to handle, and you really need the environment to support you in that. But he is supported though. Like Gene and Gunther and the Haas team aside, everyone loves Mick. Like the baby content between Mick and Max talking about how much he loves Mick and how they grew up together. Like it's so weird to think about them as family friends, but I guess it makes sense. And then the only appearance Seb makes in the entire season was in this episode to talk about Mick and how much he loves him and what a great talent he is. And it's just so lovely. Their relationship is everything. He's like his step-in father, and it's just so nice that he has him, and I'm glad that Seb made it for even 30 seconds to talk about Mick. Also, Mick had support in Kevin. I don't know if he did it to his face, but we heard Kevin defending Mick to Gunther, saying that he has more in him and that he can do it, and I just hated hearing Gunther counter that with, but anytime he does more he fucking crashes, which is a gross exaggeration. Like, but you can tell that most people love him and support him and want him to like shine. And this is particularly obvious when Mick finally scores a point, which was like the climax of the episode, and watching everyone in the garage lose it, the engineers, his mom. It was so nice to see how thrilled everyone was because you can see how much love he has. I just don't know why Haas gave up on him. And that's why like this episode was so weird because it shows how much love Mick has. And we all know how much talent he has. And all it shows, especially if you follow the actual season, all it shows is that Gunther gave up on him for not a good enough reason, in my opinion. Like, it seemed like Gunther went into the year knowing he wouldn't keep Mick, which is so sad for Mick. And his face is so heartbreaking every time I see him. I just want to give him a hug. I just want the best for him. And I'm so happy that he's found a home for now at Mercedes as a reserve driver, and I'm confident he'll be back on the grid soon. But I'm still grumpy at Gunther and Jean and Haas for just dumping the like sweetest kid ever. I also want to point out though that the biggest shock of this episode for me was when Kevin realized that Mick was going to be replaced, so he started to suggest options. First, he suggested Daniel, who Gunther rejected because we can't afford him. He's worth like 10 fucking million. And then Kevin suggested Nico. For months, everyone was dumbfounded where the fuck Nico came from, and now we know it was Kevin. Bunkers. Okay, so the next two episodes, 5 and 6, sort of flow together. I'll talk about them one at a time, but they're sort of related because they cover the silly season drama that kicked off with Seb's retirement and ended with Pierre going to AlphaTauri. And in my opinion, it's two of the best episodes of the season because the storyline was just there for them, ready to be turned into TV gold, and they did it. Um, Anyway, episode 5 sort of tells it from Otmar's point of view, which I love because, to be honest, from the outside, this all was really kind of embarrassing for Otmar. And it's not like it's not embarrassing that it happened, but also it's less embarrassing for Otmar because I kind of love him now. Kind of like I kind of stand Otmar. Yeah, let's start with Otmar's best moments first. So, first, when Otmar is ironing two shirts for his workday because he might stop for a coffee and croissant, and he says croissant like someone who doesn't speak French but works with French people, so he's trying to say it correctly. kind of like I just did. Also, another great Otmar moment was when he they showed him driving into the Alpine factory, and we hear him in the car practicing his French, where he's like, "Bonjour, je m'appelle Otmar," and he's just practicing it over and over again. And I just died. I just loved hearing him practice his French as he entered a French team. Like, they would give two fucks if he spoke broken French to them. Um, Also, Otmar during his interview asking the producers to get him a fancy coffee, which, as it turns out, a fancy coffee for Otmar is a skinny cappuccino with a bit of cinnamon on top. Also, Otmar is so over Aston Martin, which I think is what made Fernando's move even more painful for him. When he was talking about Aston Martin, he said, "The owner has high expectations. I think that the atmosphere was turning into less fun." Like, he won't even call Lawrence by his name anymore. Like, he was like, "That owner, that guy I used to work with." So at another point, he says, "Blue is my color," like, really happily. Because remember that moment when he had to go to a BWT party like a couple seasons ago, and was horrified at all the pink and the fact that he had to show up in pink. And I thought originally when this all happened, I thought it was hilarious that BWT followed him to Alpine and he still has to go to BWT events where everyone is decked out in this horrible bubblegum pink. But luckily, this is not Lawrence anymore. He is not forced to wear the pink. He can wear the blue, and he will tolerate the bubblegum pink surroundings if he has to. What we do get to see is that Otmar never seemed actually that sure about Fernando. Like, the words he's saying sound like he's sure about Fernando, but he's not really sure about Fernando. He talks a lot about investing in Oscar. He says Fernando is important for the team and talks about extending his contract, but he also keeps mentioning future proofing the team. So we could see some of his doubts creeping in from the onset, and I just don't think Fernando and Otmar's personalities mesh, which actually makes sense why Fernando and Lawrence's personalities do mesh. Makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay, so the way Drive to Survive edited this drama was so beyond anything I could have ever hoped for. I was giggling the entire time, probably because I know what happens, but to see it in this format was just everything. So, okay, this all started the last race before summer break. Now, the first thing that happened that kicked all of this silly season stuff off was Seb retiring. And honestly, the most iconic moment of this episode, and there were a lot of iconic moments in this episode, but the most iconic moment of this episode goes to Checo, who was caught seeing Seb's announcement live while he was sitting in for his Netflix interviews. And it just shows it shows Checo on his phone in the interview chair going, "Seb has Instagram? Am I missing something?" Um, and then it cuts to the black and white video of Seb sitting down in the chair in his video. And then it cuts back to Checo going, "Okay." And then it cuts back to Seb going, "I officially announced my retirement from Formula One at the end of the 2022 season." And it cuts back to Checo with the most shocked face. And like his face, Checo's face, like retracted into the back of his head. Pure shock as he's like holding the phone, like staring at the camera, like, "What did I just watch?" It was amazing. It was so good. I'm so glad they caught him reacting on camera. It was so funny. So now that we know that Seb is leaving, we know that things are about to change. The moves are about to be made, but we're back to following this storyline through the lens of Alpine. And we're still at the last race before the summer break, and they show us Otmar throwing Fernando a birthday party, seemingly to show how much Otmar cares about Fernando. But we do catch the audio from Fernando and Otmar's conversation up on a balcony about the contract, and Otmar is telling him the contract will be ready soon, and Fernando doesn't seem to believe him. He's like, "Okay, but like when?" And Otmar is like insistent that he's punctual and a man of his word, but doesn't seem to be that way because Fernando still hasn't gotten his contract. And then we cut to Lawrence in sunglasses walking in slow motion through the paddock. And whenever Lawrence is shown in slow motion, we know there's about to be some speedy business decisions being made. And sure enough, doo-doo, the little tweet sound that they employed so much during these next few episodes, we see that Fernando has moved to Aston Martin, and the way that DTS has decided to document this is through a meme slideshow, which is amazing and honestly the best way to convey the vibe that this announcement like caused online. Like this was, it was literally just meme after meme after meme, like Fernando sitting in front of a burning building grinning. And then we get to see the reaction within the team. We see Otmar going on and on about loyalty. Then we cut to Otmar at the factory giving a speech that Fernando is leaving, but like we'll show him because we have Oscar and he's our new driver. And then the screen shows the tweet announcing Oscar is now the new driver for Alpine. The captions say intense music builds, and intense music was building because then we cut to Zach talking about Daniel not fitting in with the team anymore. And then we cut to Oscar at Alpine working out and like staring like very villainously into the mirror as Otmar's voiceover talks about how great it will be for Oscar to drive for them. And then it cuts immediately, like silence, and it cuts to Oscar's infamous tweet refuting that he is or will ever be driving for Alpine. And this like villainy music continues to play as Oscar is like benching, like all stony face, like looking like a proper villain. And then we see Otmar speeding off in his little Alpine sports car, which somehow he fit into, down this like winding country road. And it's just so dramatic. The like sharp cuts from scene to scene, the like sound effects that they keep using, this like intense music building, like all of it together is just, it's a work of art. I feel like I'm watching like an action thriller, especially with like the shots of Oscar like benching with like completely stony faced. It was great. Such artistry. I was giggling in delight this entire episode. It was just so good. But I would be remiss not to mention Fernando's hits because he had some great quotes in this episode. First one, we are very selfish, drivers in general, but in Formula One, there has to be always good characters and bad ones, heroes and anti-heroes. Me? I am on the dark side. Incredible. And then the best one after all this news drops, it just cuts to Fernando in his Netflix interview chair. And as he's grinning, he waggles his fingers at the camera and goes, "Bye bye, I'm still the bad guy," and then walks off. I mean, Alexa, play Antihero by Taylor Swift, am I right? Like, what a moment. Alright, so the episode picks up after Oscar's tweet, and we're now following the Horner family. Ginger Spice and Mr. Ginger Spice, aka Christian, are on a little family camping trip. We saw them setting up tents. Ginger Spice makes a sex joke, and Christian's like, huh? Anyway, now they're all around this little bonfire, and they're just talking shop, chatting nonsense. And then Ginger Spice goes, "Do you think the Alpine lot are cross with Oscar?" Which is like such a funny way of putting it because cross seems like such a mild term for what Alpine was probably feeling at this moment. And Christian goes, huh? So Ginger Spice reads him the tweet that Oscar sent out. And the important bit from this interaction is that Christian says what we're all thinking, which is that the tweet implies that Oscar already has a seat confirmed. Otherwise, he would never tweet something so definitive. And then we leave the Ginger Spice family and we see Oscar jogging through medieval France with his manager and former F1 driver, Mark Webber, who is still very hot and very Australian. And also just confirms my original thought that Oscar couldn't possibly be Australian and must be British. And when I found out he was Australian, I was shocked because he is pale. I guess that's my only reason. That's not a good reason. Anyway, so they're like chatting about what happened, blah, 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 blah. And then we cut to Zach's team planning to release the video. And they say a specific time. Then DTS puts up a clock as the seconds tick up to the exact time the video was released. And the video is, of course, Daniel's announcement that he is leaving McLaren. And rewatching this video just makes me want to cry because he looks like he's about to cry. It's just so sad. Like I was crying the entire episode because it's just such a sad turn of events. I did love to see Checo chatting to him a bit about it because he's obviously been in that position before. But his conversation with Checo did give us a juicy bit of information because he did let it slip to Checo that he found out during the break, which is shite and a completely different story than what McLaren was feeding to us. And like you could tell that it happened during the break. He was that the video he recorded, what it was so raw. If this had been in conversations way earlier, if he knew way earlier, then he would have had time to compose himself. But that video was fresh. Like the wound was raw, and you could tell. Lando's reaction to this was as expected. We see a couple of clips of him saying he'll miss Daniel, but then like you gotta perform. And they also played a clip of him saying he doesn't feel bad for Daniel, which is weird because I'm pretty sure that that clip is from Daniel's first year's struggles when he was asked that and he got a lot of flack for it at the time. Like I'm 90% sure they played that from then, unless he once again said he doesn't feel bad for Daniel. um, which by the way, there were a lot of rumors that Lando was doing damage control with like a GQ interview and like something else because he was going to be portrayed poorly in Drive to Survive, but I don't think he was portrayed poorly. I think this was as expected from Lando, and I think he will miss Daniel. I think he does miss Daniel, but I also think he thinks that you have to perform in order to keep your seat, which is fair enough. He's allowed to think that. I don't think he looked that bad. So if that was what he was doing damage control for, that's weird. Unless they cut something else out. But truly, I think the villain of this episode of the 2022 F1 season of life is Zach Brown. Guys, I cannot believe I ever called him F1 Santa. He just came off so fratty and like such a dick. Like we see him laughing at Otmar with Lando and some of the engineers, and in his DTS interview, he says Otmar has been caught with his pants down. If I were him, I'd be very embarrassed. Like, yeah, it's embarrassing, but chill out, bro. Like, you got the checkmate. You won the game. Like, you don't have to rub it in this way. Like, this is mean. It's just mean. I will say that the unsung hero of this episode is this Italian journalist who we saw in some B-roll footage talking to Daniel. And the journalist literally says to Daniel, I told you not to trust Zach. And then I remember that Daniel was stolen from Renault by Zach Brown. He has a history of fucking Alpine over. It's like, you know how people say a zebra doesn't change its stripes? The zebra have, is that the phrase? Cheetahs doesn't change its spots? Whatever about cheaters. That can be also said for Zach Brown, but for some reason I didn't read it that way at the time, and now I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the way he's speaking about it, and it makes me boil on the inside. He's just mean. And poor Otmar just seems so confused and so sad. He's like, but no one was loyal. It's a good seat. Like, you just want to hug him, like, oh, Otmar, I guess it's not that good of a seat. Anyway, he goes over to see Zach, whose office, by the way, says Zach's office by invitation only on the window. And Otmar tells Zach that they are going to sue Oscar, which freaks Zach out because the contract between him and Oscar kind of stipulates that he takes on Oscar's problems, I guess. And Zach's like, oh, that's not ideal. Like, his problems are my problems ish now. And also, I have to pay Daniel like over $10 million. So this isn't a good time. And Omar's like, okay, and then just leaves. And then Zach is like, I'm gonna take matters into my own hands. I'm gonna do the noble thing here. And he hops on over to Laurent's office, just completely bypassing Otmar, and asks Laurent to do a trade for Daniel, which I don't know if we knew he straight up tried to trade human beings. Like, is that a thing here? And also, why is it a thing after you already stole someone and then they threaten you with a lawsuit? Wouldn't the better move here be have been to go directly to Alpine and be like, look, we have something going on with Oscar. I don't want this to be embarrassing for you guys. I would love to offer you Daniel in return. So, like, make it less mean and less like, oh shit, you might sue me. Why don't you not sue me and let me give you this driver I just fired? Like, you're not doing anyone any favors. But Laurent's response is like, yeah, totally, he can be on the list. Meanwhile, Laurent isn't even thinking about Daniel as an option because this is, by the way, when I remembered he left Renault for McLaren, and it seems like everyone is still butthurt about it. By the way, moment of silence for Cyril Bidabidaboo. Okay. Anyway, what we do find out is that on Laurent's list, his short list includes both Pierre and Nico. Like, why the fuck is Nico Hulkenberg on everyone's short list? How is Nico better than Daniel? How is Nico even a contender for this grid? He's like old and not that good. Why? Anyway, we see that Laurent is not seriously at all considering Daniel as an option, and that really his sights are basically only set on Pierre. But regardless of that, DTS still set this episode up to sort of be like a Pierre versus Daniel, not like in a mean way, just like this is between them. When it wasn't between them, it was just for Pierre. um, and they played flashbacks of both of their careers. It was like both of them sitting in their cars before a race, and then like Daniel in his helmet, and then it flashes back to his career, and then Pierre in his helmet, it flashes back to his career, and then do a side by side shot of them in their cars and their helmets, looking like straight ahead. And then shockingly, the seat went to Pierre. And Pierre says that, like, emotionally, it's something very unique to be French racing for a French team, which is nice. The French love the French and love to be French. French, French, French. I also loved how this episode ended with Otmar going, good luck to Oscar. Like, it just kind of made me laugh that as soon as things worked out with Pierre, Otmar was like, whatever, I'm over it. It happened. It's a nice trait to have. He's not holding a grudge, even though I think he should. Anyway, two standout moments in this episode for me were the quick shot of Fernando walking through the paddock and someone yelling at him, "Look what you did!" And he was like, "Me? Not me, Seb." As if it's Seb's fault that Fernando fucked over his team, which caused Oscar to fuck over the same team, which caused McLaren to fuck over Daniel, which caused Daniel to not have a seat. But anyway. Also, the best moment for me of this episode was our introduction to Pierre, and it was of him walking up to a group of Alpine team members and going, "Hello, tell me all the gossip." And then he starts like quickly talking about everything he knows, and he's like, "Oh, what pages are you on? Oh, that one's the blocked one. Yeah, I know." And like he knows all the Instagram gossip pages for F1, and I'm just like dead that Pierre is so like obviously Pierre is tuned in, but seeing it is another thing. And then Pierre being physically removed from the gossiping is hilarious. Like he's like really like holding on to the table as he's being pulled away for media duties. And as he's walking away, he turns to the camera and goes, "This is not ending up in Drive to Survive, I'm telling you." Pierre is here for the drama, and I loved it. I bet he ate up these last two episodes. And of course, the final moment, the epic moment, was Daniel taking the like cut board, for TV, like the scene cut board, and he wrote FEA on them for fuck 'em all, and then promptly releasing FEA merch as soon as the season dropped. And the email I got for it as well, they've written copy to make it sound super profound and like a really great message when really he's literally just saying fuck all of you. Love it. Love Daniel. So upset he's gone. But I did enjoy the drama we got with this whole silly season thing. They really did it justice. Okay, so episode 7 was all about Checo's place at Red Bull, and I'm not really sure why this was a thing because I don't think that Checo's place at Red Bull was ever that much a jeopardy, and this is when I know that Christian will actively play things up for the camera. Like, I don't think he's always doing it, but I think there's times that he does it because I really do not think that Checo was in that much danger of losing his seat. But what I did enjoy was seeing how hard Ginger Spice stands Checo. Like, she might actually fall out with Christian if he ever fires Checo. She goes hard for Checo. In the beginning, when they're in their kitchen, she's defending Checo to Christian, saying he's proven himself to be a worthy teammate. She tells him, I love Checo. I just think he's got such a good heart. And Christian almost looks annoyed. Like, God damn it, Ginger Spice. This scene is supposed to be about our doubts for Checo, not about you waxing poetic to him. Also, hilarious clip of Ginger Spice, Checo, and Jon Snow in Monaco as Ginger Spice just stares lovingly at Checo, like leaning into every word he says, and Jon Snow's just like watching them. As per usual, Jon Snow knows nothing. And again, back to like my original like issue, I don't know why Christian is going so hard at the idea that Checo could be replaced. Like, I don't think anyone doubts him as a D2 at Red Bull, particularly at the time this was being filmed. Like, yeah, there was drama at the end of season, but it wasn't happening before Monaco, which is when this conversation was happening. It's just dumb. Um, the tipping point for me, though, when I knew Christian must really be playing it up for the cameras, was when he entertained Yuki as a possible replacement. Like, okay, sure, Christian. Like, I'm sure that you are going to replace Checo with Yuki, who I love, but he's not going to be Checo's replacement. He's not. Um, and I think it's because also Christian saw what happens when you put a young driver in next to Max. It's not a good recipe. He needs someone older who's more willing to take on a D2 role. And also I loved Checo doing a photo shoot for AlphaTauri and the photographer just like losing it at how good Checo was apparently. He just kept going, "Oh yes. Oh my god, yes." Checo does not no one looks that great in AlphaTauri, and Checo in particular looks just average. Just average. Anyway, I loved watching Checo's win in Monaco and seeing him triumph and getting his contract extended. The same weekend his son Emilio was born. By the way, they conveniently left out the like allegations that he cheated on his wife in Monaco, which that was super allegedly. I don't know if that was ever proven. But they also left out that he crashed during quali intentionally, which again is allegedly crashed during quali intentionally. Both of those are rumors, but I will say that I support Checo and love him, and I can't complain too much that they left the negative stuff out. This episode also featured Alex's only appearance in the season, while he was walking through the paddock and told the Netflix cameras, "Look, it's Gunther." That's way more interesting. I half expected Gunther to not actually be there and for Alex to just like make a run for it, but Gunther was actually there. All right. Episode 8. This episode was amazing just for the Gasonoda content. Pierre and Yuki being friends and being nice about each other and joking around is something I could watch for literally hours. But this episode also showed Yuki's growth. He's much calmer on track, more polite on the radio, and he tolerates his training now. And in 2023, we know he's actually excited for training, but in 2022, he was tolerating it, which is growth. But now he's got less of a mentor on the team, which is what he had with Pierre, and more of a foe. To be honest, Yuki seems a bit nervous about Nick, and I'd be nervous about him too. I ended up loving Nick from what I saw during the season, but I have to say that the quote they chose to include from Nick when he's talking about his hopes for what he's going to bring to the team. He says, "I believe a little maturity. Yuki is very entertaining for all of us, but I'm not sure I should trust whatever he teaches me, and I'm not sure if it's wise to repeat or replicate his actions." Honestly, that doesn't bode well for their relationship if I was basing it on that quote alone. Yes, Nick is 28 and Yuki is 22, so he's naturally bringing more maturity to the team, but that was kind of mean to Yuki. And I guess that's kind of the power of TV editing. Because Nick and Yuki do get along. We've seen it. We've seen it on social media and we've seen it on DTS. And I think this is Netflix toying like on the border of driver drama. Like they didn't actually cause drama, but that's a shady quote for them to include from Nick. Um, as for who will actually be D1, Franz Toe said that it's still up for grabs. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I really want to see Yuki step it up this year because I think he should be leading the team, or at the very least, that they should be equal and not a D1, D2 situation. And by the way, the best part of this episode was obviously Pierre and Yuki. The clip of them doing karaoke and singing Hello by Adele in the AlphaTauri offices, and they're like in a room somewhere, and I think the door is even closed, but then they pan to the office where all the engineers and analysts are sitting, and you can hear them screeching the song, and like everyone just bursts out laughing, and like you can tell that they love the dynamic. Like it's such a fun dynamic to have around. Like everyone's just laughing, kind of rolling their eyes and like loving it, as like all these serious people in their ties and their button-up shirts are like typing away numbers, and they're just screeching Hello by Adele. It was such a great juxtaposition, and it's so Gasanoda, and I love it. AlphaTauri loves it. I just don't know how they will survive next year without them together. All right, episode 9. So this episode was mostly Christian denying that Red Bull breached the cost cap, and then by the end of the episode, him saying, "So looks like we breached the cost cap." And I do still kind of agree with him. Like $400,000 over the limit for catering is not like really reflective in car performance. In fact, it could ruin car performance because if the drivers are so fat from all the catering, they're going to weigh the car down. So really, it's deterring car performance. And Christian is clearly salty this episode because he's picking fights with people he shouldn't, like Mattia. Mattia's got his own problems, Christian. I don't think he's leaking stories about you to the press. And also, Mattia's always kind of been on your side, so I don't know why you're just like fighting with him for no reason. I also like Zach saying Christian can dish it, but he can't really take it, which is kind of true. Sorry, Christian. And also when Zach wrote that open letter demanding there to be some repercussions for Red Bull, and Christian was so angry, Zach was like, he would have done the exact same thing that I did, which is true, I think. Christian would have. I think he would have done it better. There would have been a bit more finesse to his pettiness than like a really long open letter. So, like, Zach is correct. Christian can dish it, but he can't really take it. But also, no one can really dish it like Christian can. Um, and I still think that the press conference that they held with Zach and Christian and all the team principals that were like fighting at the time was incredible content for whoever organized that combination of team principals. And I'm so happy that they played the part in the press conference where Christian accused the other teams of fucking with Red Bull employees' mental health. But I do think that they should have left in the part where Christian said that their actions are causing the children of Red Bull employees to be bullied at school. That was an incredible petty moment from Christian and just really should have been highlighted here. Anyways, that's it for episode 9 from me. Episode 10 was like a cute little finale episode. We wrapped up some unfinished storylines like Alpine beating McLaren in the Constructors' Championship and Zach going, Otmar might get the last laugh this time around, which honestly made me very happy for Otmar. I was a little sad to see Mattia defending his future at Ferrari when we all know he was fired. It's really sad because I do love Mattia. I do think they needed to change something up. I'm not necessarily sure that Mattia was the only issue, but he was also a great character to have around, and I'm sad to see him go. Some great interview quotes from this episode include George saying, I've got 4 single beds in my room, and I'm not even sure it's a family room, to be honest. Which is just comical to imagine George walking into a hotel room in Abu Dhabi and there just being 4 beds in there, which is kind of funny to think about. Then the producers asked Daniel to take off his hat for the shot, and Daniel looks at them like they're insane, takes off his hat to shake out his hair, and he's like, no, I've been wearing a hat all day. I look like Bigfoot's dick. Put the hat back on. Also, I enjoyed Gunther during his Netflix interview asking for an espresso, but then being like, oh, I don't want to be pretentious. And the producers say they can't deny an Italian man espresso. And then they ask if Gunther considers himself Italian, To which Gunther just wiggled his eyebrowless eyebrows. And if you still haven't clocked that Gunther doesn't have eyebrows, I encourage you to go back and look at that particular scene because it's never more obvious that this man doesn't have eyebrows than when he's trying to wiggle them. And it's really just him like wrinkling his forehead. Lewis also sort of squashed any rumors about him leaving. He said, I will 100% be in the car next year, but if they make another Top Gun, I will not pass that up again. Someone will have to drive for me, which I think is a good call. Work is everything, but not when it comes to working with Tom Cruise. You really should enjoy the finer moments. We also got some great extra footage. We saw Gunther talking to a couple of guys, and one of the guys says about Gunther, he's the most popular as well. All these women want to have sex with him. And Gunther goes, I wish. Okay. Um, Lando is like in the McLaren kitchen trying to get food, and then he says he can't eat a croissant with chocolate in it. And then Lando is like in the McLaren kitchen talking about what he wants to eat and like about the food that's going to be available. And then he sees like a pile of croissants and he wants to take one. Then he's like, oh, do you have any without chocolate in it? And the chef was like, no, we only have the ones with chocolate in it. And Lando's like, I can't eat that. And the chef offered to pull the chocolate out for them. No one should be condoning Lando's bland ass diet. Like, I hope the chef was joking, just said that for the camera, and I hope these chefs aren't walking around pulling flavor out of, like, Lando's meals. You should be able to eat a chocolate croissant, bro. It's, like, not that big of a deal. You also, if you don't want the chocolate, you can eat around it. The pain au chocolat is not like all chocolate, it has pieces of chocolate in it. You can eat around it and not make a grown up chef pull the chocolate out for you. I really hope it was a joke. We also got some footage of the drivers talking to each other, which I think we got a lot more this season to show the camaraderie between them, I guess. And there was a cute moment of Alex saying he has a good picture of Daniel taking a picture of Seb, and Daniel goes, "Woo, boyfriends of Instagram." And then Daniel took a picture of a whole group of them, and Carlos goes to check out the picture that he took, and he goes, so, did we make the cut? Because Daniel started an Instagram called daniel.jpg. I also like the end where they introduce the new drivers and all the new players in the paddock, and it kicks off with a shot of Seb leaving the paddock with the words, it's out with the old, rude, and in with the new. And then we see Fred Vasseur in the chair getting asked about the rumors of him moving to Ferrari, which he did. But I chuckled when the question was like, so how does it feel to be linked to, and Fred interrupts and goes, Claudia Schiffer? You wish, Fred. You wish. He also says he looks great in red, which is a bold statement, Fred. Few people do. But what I will commend Fred on, now that I've seen him in red, is that he has opted out of the full red outfit and he's going with red top, black bottoms, which I think helps the situation. It truly does. But still, few people look good in fire truck red. Will Ferrari be offended that I said they're fire truck red? I didn't mean it. We also see Nico claim that he was only wanted back on track because of his good looks, which honestly is the only reason I can think of, even though it's sort of like a washed out hot rather than like a in my prime hot. I did enjoy though that they proceeded to play both Nico and Kevin saying suck my balls and Gunther going, huh, I heard something about that, yeah. Which is obviously a reference to Kevin telling Nico to suck his balls after they had a spat on track. And Netflix just decided not to play the original clip because why do we need context? Um, we need Will Buxton telling us it's important to qualify first because then you start first, but any new viewers will have no idea why everyone's talking about sucking balls. But I think the greatest thing that DTS did was the most heartfelt farewell for Daniel. They played literally every all-star moment Daniel had on the show. The flashback montage is more than I could bear. They even included the nutsack song and Daniel calling Netflix a bunch of C words. And Daniel goes, the show won't be the same without me. What will you do? And honestly, I don't think they know. I don't think any of us know. I think Netflix is actually sadder than any other human alive that Daniel will no longer be there because he was their show. He truly was. He broke America for F1, more or less. Now, quickly, we need to talk about the missing moments from season 5 that were huge in the 2022 season. So, first of all, Japan. They barely covered Japan, only as like a Yuki is Japanese thing. That was the extent of the Japanese coverage, even though it was a horrible, horrible race, horrible calls from the FIA. It was pouring down rain. There was a tractor on the track. They like, Pierre wasn't warned about it. He almost hit the tractor. Everyone was really angry because the driver literally died in those conditions in Japan and nothing's changed. Pierre got into a huge fight with the FIA. It was a whole situation and they cut all that out. And then Brazil was a huge thing. Kevin got pole in Brazil. George won. And it was also just like a really good race. So why didn't they include it? Were they like not in Brazil? How do you not send them to Brazil? Brazil is always like a winner. Why wouldn't you go there? And if you did go there, why didn't you include it? Because George's win and Kevin's pole were insane and should have been included. Alfa Romeo was not in it like at all. Like it's really weird because Valtteri was such a huge plot point for like 4 seasons and they didn't even show him this season. And Guan Yu had like 15 seconds on screen and it was literally to say he was okay after the Silverstone crash and to say thanks George for helping me. Like okay. Also, it would have been great to have more Alfa Romeo content because then we could have gotten to know Fred more before he became the team principal for Ferrari and now is a major player in everything. And I feel like I barely know Fred other than he eats plastic flowers and shoots everyone with a water gun. Another thing that was not covered as much as I think it should have been was Ferrari strategy. Like, yeah, they covered it a bit, but they didn't cover it much past like Silverstone. Like, the time when Ferrari decided to work on their communication and started ending every message to Charles on the radio with question and like waiting for him to make calls, which is insane. Also, the finger wag. I really needed more on the finger wag. Another thing is Nick. So Alex Albon was out with appendicitis and Nick filled in for him. Scored points in a Williams while Nicholas Latifi failed to do so. Nick post race needing to be lifted out of the car and needing help taking his suit off. It was such like a fun thing. And it also was great like context for him getting the spot at AlphaTauri and it would have made it much more satisfying to know that he like worked for it. And it would have served the episode better to focus on that than spending so much time like doubting Yuki's future, which I don't think was actually that much in doubt. It was kind of pointless. It would have been much better to follow Nick's journey to F1, which I think was a great one. Um, Seb's retirement. I'm going to assume that this was less about Netflix not wanting to cover Seb and more about Seb not wanting to be covered by Netflix. Like, there's literally a moment that feels like it's minutes after his retirement announcement when he's walking away from the media going, enough of this, let's do something else. Like, obviously, they want to talk to you after you said you're retiring. But Seb's just not into that stuff. And, like, I think that's probably a big part. He just didn't want to participate, so they didn't have that much content with him. But they still could have done more to pay homage to, like, one of the best drivers ever and probably, like, the best human being to ever exist on an F1 track and to ever exist on it again. Like, no one will be Seb. He he should have gotten a little more time. But again, I'm not going to fully blame them for that. The driver's dinner. This would have been a great moment to show how everyone gets along, which is like the vibe they were going for with season 5. And I know they obviously couldn't take cameras to the dinner, but it would have been great to get some of the drivers discussing the driver's dinner and getting some insight into it. That would have been, but I guess they're not covering Seb's retirement, so why would they cover Seb's farewell dinner? I don't know. Now, driver drama. Like, I know that they're steering away from that, whether it's because they're always accused of fabricating drama or whether it's because Max said that he wasn't going to participate if they did that. But there was so many things that were like just there for the taking and I just don't understand why they didn't include it. First, there was that drama with Fernando and Esteban, which although minor, wasn't really played out. And like even though they're still friends, there was still like contention between them that played out on track. So they should have kind of covered it, I think. Um, and the drama between Esteban and Pierre, or at least the history of it, because it's very well known, it's well documented. Like the fact that they're faking a friendship is hilarious and should have totally been touched on. Like to give some context to the fact that Esteban and Pierre do not like each other and will not be racing on a team together. They could have easily incorporated that. Okay, and so the final thing that wasn't covered that I'm like, I just don't understand why it wasn't covered was the Max and Checo drama. And this is like the most major drama between drivers that happened, and I really think it should have been covered. Um, but it was, I think it all like reached a new height at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Well, actually, height's the wrong word. I think that's the only time any of us discovered that they were having issues at all. But it was when Checo tried to get ahead of Max, and Max ignored team orders to let Checo through, saying he knows why. You all know why. And everyone thought it was weird because Max had already won the championship and like he could give Checo this win. And Checo was angry and Max was angry. And then there were the rumors that Max didn't let Checo through because he was getting revenge for Checo intentionally crashing out in qualifying and ruining Max's flying lap, and then Red Bull saying everything's been squashed and we're not going to talk about it anymore. That was insane drama because it doesn't look like it was squashed. We all thought Checo was like entering his villain era. Like, that was ready for the taking. They could have easily covered that. But, and the only reason I can think of for why they didn't include it is because of Max's participation, and whether Max said, I will participate, but you can't show this, or whether Red Bull straight up went to DTS and was like, if you don't include this storyline, we will convince Max to participate. Whoever initiated it, I really think that's the main reason we didn't see this play out in the season. Okay, so in conclusion, I think there's two major shifts in Drive to Survive moving forward. One, the distancing itself from driver drama. I have a feeling that trend will continue with the next season. And I'm more than happy for them to focus on team principal drama as long as it continues to be as juicy as it was this year. Um, the silly season covered from their perspective was really, really fun. And I'm more than happy for that to continue as long as they're giving us some drama, some behind the scenes drama that we're not getting on our own. And also the other major thing is that I'm not sure how the series is going to be able to move on without Daniel. Like they for sure were more distressed than anyone else in the F1 space with Daniel leaving. Like Daniel Ricciardo's face is the opening shot of DTS. His quotes are forever imprinted on my brain. Like they have Gunther, but he's no Danny Rick. I'm sure they'll find any way they can use him. Maybe, and this is me hoping he could take over Will Buxton's role and maybe give us some less obvious statements to play in between stuff that could be fun and interesting. But it is a sad day for Drive to Survive when Daniel is no longer contributing. And I hope that day doesn't come. I hope they find a way to keep him around. Okay, anyways, I love Drive to Survive. Literally always before it comes out, I'm annoyed. It's the week before the next season starts, and then I watch it and I get super hyped, and I'm literally bouncing up and down for a week waiting for the actual season to start, which I guess is the whole point because Drive to Survive is for entertainment and for marketing, and it does it very well. So, all those real fans, as they call themselves, who love to complain about F1 being infiltrated by fake fans that come from Drive to Survive or by Drive to Survive not being authentic. Like, Drive to Survive gives you a completely different perspective. If you watch the actual season, you know what actually happened. You're able to follow the storylines from a different perspective and get new quotes and get behind the scenes, and it's like fun. You take it at face value. Like, if you want to see a race from beginning to end, you can watch the actual season, which is what Drive to Survive encourages people to do. Encourages people who have never watched F1 to start watching F1. It's my origin story and I will never shit on it. I hope they keep going forever. Anyways, that's it for my Drive to Survive Season 5 recap. Which, by the way, if you're here straight from Netflix and aren't yet following the F1 season, I do have a 2023 F1 season primer to help you get to know everyone in the paddock this year and what to expect from the season. This weekend, we're headed to Jeddah for the second GP of the year, so make sure you subscribe and follow at BoxBoxF1 Pod on social so you don't miss when the Saudi Arabian GP recap drops. See you soon, BoxBox.